Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Michael Skipper with the Greater Nashville Regional Council. It's a pleasure to be with you. I always enjoy my time with this distinguished group of leaders, even if virtually. Let me start by wishing Bill McCord a happy birthday.
Yes.
Like me, he is a solid Virgo. And if you've worked with Bill, you probably recognize that as well. I appreciate the opportunity to be at the top of the agenda to provide a brief update on Plan Gallatin, which is your process to update the city's comprehensive plan for growth and development. And before I get into this update, just want to thank Bill McCord and his staff within the planning department and Rosemary Bates with the Gallatin EDA to help us prepare the slides and the update that we have for you this evening. Before I get into it, I'd just like to say a couple words about the Greater Nashville Regional Council for those who are on the line who aren't familiar. But the Greater Nashville Regional Council, or GNRC, is a public body that was created by the state legislature back in the 60s. It's owned and operated by cities and counties across Middle Tennessee, and it works alongside those city and county governments on issues related to economic development, community development, social services. So we exist primarily to support city and county governments across the region and largely outside of the city of Nashville. Tonight, I've got a quick update for you on Plan Gallatin, which is an initiative that we've been working alongside you on now for a little over a year. Even before then, we had worked with the city council on a strategic plan, which was initially the big decision point by the council to go in and update the land use policies and the design guidelines that are influencing how growth takes shape across the city, which is particularly important in this time of rapid development. Even with COVID-19, we're still seeing quite a bit of development happen across the region. Tonight's update is going to be focused on quickly updating you on some of the community engagement efforts that have been underway. There's a little bit of a pause as the March tornadoes rolled through and then COVID-19 pandemic hit. So we regrouped and really restructured a lot of what we had planned to do with the public, which was going to be out and about in the community. So we had to sort of redesign that and put it all online. But I think the team did a really good job of repurposing the tools to make sure that we were really fulfilling our responsibility to listen to the public so that y'all were presented a plan that you could have confidence in terms of it representing the wishes of the community that you serve. So I'm going to focus largely on update to the community engagement, but also want to give you a sense of where we are with the plan drafting as we do that alongside your planning team. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the results of the visual preference survey that we conducted last month. But before I get into this, I do want to really remind you about the big kickoff, this sort of home stretch that we're entering to sort of go through some public discussions about the different scenarios that the city has available to itself as you decide how you want to grow. So that sort of coming down the home stretch, if you will, on the heels of the Derby weekend is really where the meat gets on the bone for developing this plan. And before we start drafting a plan, I thought it was really important to engage the citizenry and the businesses and just what their options are. You know, there's we had presented back in early June the projected impacts of what would happen if the city grew at a very low density. And then we also projected the potential impacts of what would happen if the city grew in a much more compact way. And when I say projected impacts, what I mean is that we are looking at how would that growth pattern influence or impact your transportation systems, your other infrastructure, traffic congestion, and demand for public services. So we looked at what the impact would be on a host of different growth scenarios, 3 to be specific: sprawling trend, like your present day patterns, and then a compact growth scenario. And we conducted a survey after the big public workshop we had on June 4th. There were a little over 100 folks that participated in that workshop where we went through each of those scenarios and showed how they would impact your quality of life moving forward. Of those 100 folks who participated in that event, 60% of them followed up with us through a survey to weigh in on their preferences with the information that was provided at the workshop. So 60% of those who participated in the workshop then did the survey, and the results from that survey, before I get to this one, I think are important to remind ourselves of. 66% of those who became educated about the choices in front of you ended up preferring the compact growth scenario. So we had the sprawling scenario, we had the trend scenario, which is kind of where you are today, just projecting that forward. And then we had the compact growth scenario. And so 2/3 of those who went through that process ultimately preferred the compact scenario. And about 23% of the participants prefer the sprawling scenario. And when I first saw that result, I thought, well, that's kind of a polarized result in that you've got the two biggest preferences being compact and sprawling. They seem like sort of polar opposites of each other, but they're actually very complementary, which I thought ultimately was a good takeaway from that survey. Because if you think about it, the more you can grow compact in the right areas, the more it preserves your ability to have low density and open space in the other parts of the city. It's really sort of this in between that you find yourselves in, that where you get a lot of homogeneity, a lot of the same thing being built across the city, which doesn't provide a lot of options for residents and businesses. So I was actually quite pleased to see there was a little bit of preference for the two extremes, because they really go hand in glove when it comes to building a city. Another interesting finding from that survey was that 42% of the people who went through that workshop shifted their thoughts on how they viewed growth and development. The information that was provided in terms of the implication of the options that were presented to the city translated into people changing their minds about what they wanted. So a lot of people did start off wanting compact growth, but by the end of that workshop, found themselves much more attracted to that type of development pattern. So that was the survey we did before we launched the visual preference survey. This is sort of round 2 of the community engagement process that we've been doing since that June 4th workshop. And so I'm going to get into some of the results here. In all, we had 826 folks take the survey. Most of those were done in the first week of the survey going live. And the average time it took people to do this was about 7 minutes, 52 seconds. That's a really important number because it was a pretty burdensome survey. People had to wade through a lot of photos to tell us what they liked and didn't like, or what they thought was suitable or not suitable for the city of Gallatin. So I was really impressed that many people took that much time online to weigh in on the preferences. A little bit about the respondents. I always think it's important. These are online surveys where anybody can participate. They're not random sample surveys like the mayor and Rosemary just did through ETC Institute. So this is a convenient sample. So it's just anybody can take it. So it's really important to understand how this jives with the population across the city. So let me go through a couple of characteristics of the people who completed the survey. So most of them have been in Gallatin for less than 10 years, although you did have 45% say that they've been in Gallatin for more than a decade. A pretty good distribution, I thought, in terms of the people that came to the table in terms of their historic experience with the city of Gallatin. Home zip codes, most of the folks their home addresses in Gallatin, but you had a few zip codes. You got Castilian Springs and Hendersonville and Bethpage and Portland up on the screen. So you have some folks that don't live in Gallatin, but they work here or they have investments in here that participated in this particular survey. In terms of where they work, 70% plus said they do have a job. 36% say they work inside the Gallatin city limits. A little under 30% say they're not currently employed. In terms of age distribution, this is where you start to see a little deviation from those who actually live in the city, but by and large, it's pretty good numbers from a respondent age standpoint. We certainly undersampled the younger folks. 18 to 24% were very, very underrepresented in the survey results I'm about to share with you. And we oversampled those 55 to 74 by quite a bit. But we did oversample them as much as you would typically see in a survey effort like this. So I was really pleased, even though we were undersampling them, sort of the younger and middle-aged folks do have a voice in the survey. And of course, before we wrap all this up, we'll make sure we're leveling that out and are held accountable to making sure we're representing the interests of all those who live in Gallatin. But that's a look at the age of the respondents here. This is race and ethnicity. Certainly, as is the case with a lot of these surveys, we tend to oversample white Caucasians, undersample minority populations. It was no different here. We do need to make sure that as we begin drafting this plan and provide recommendations to you, that it is indeed attentive to the needs of everybody who lives in the city of Gallatin, not just those who participate in the survey. efforts. The respondent household income, we generally undersampled low income, oversampled higher income earners throughout the city. So that's another thing we just need to be aware of as we interpret the results and as we move forward with plan drafting. And then we track for any of the things that we do with the public, we track their prior experience with Plan Gallatin. And we were happy to see that 26% of the people who did the survey were new to the process. So we're building a bigger audience with every single outreach effort that we put forward. And that's good to see. It's also good to see that more than half of the folks who participated had heard about Plan Gallatin in the news. So that's a good testament to Jeff and Josh with the paper. So I appreciate all the work that you all have done to get the word out. So let's get into the results. So the first thing I'm going to share with you is we had packaged together different options for residential character and different options for non-residential character. What I mean by that is like office and commercial, other uses. And we asked people to essentially tell us whether they wanted to see more of that or less of that in the city as the city grows. And so I'm going to kind of go through residential first. Then I'm going to pause and give you my take on what we're seeing, and also just a few tips for how to interpret this and how not to interpret. So the first thing we tested was large lot residential. And for this option, we provided these two images. Hopefully they come across your screen clear. Hopefully you can, I should have checked to make sure everybody can see my screen. Okay, let me see if I can get this to full screen mode. I don't know if that's any better, but this is the two images that we provided to represent large lot residential. And what we found here is that, you know, by and large, people wanted more of this in the city of Gallatin as it grows. About 10% of those respondents that they didn't want any more of this. But the pattern as we go through from large lot down to multifamily, you definitely see a pattern of where people, more people are saying no more of this as you get a little bit more dense. And that's interesting. Remember that, because it's almost the opposite of what we find on the commercial and non-residential side. And it's also somewhat of a contradiction with what people have said they wanted through some of the other tests that we've done. But just remember that. So medium lot residential, the images we tested and the results. Again, as we get more dense with the residential, a bit more folks say they want no more of this. But what's really important to note, though, is that even with small lot residential, which you already have some of across the city of Gallatin, you still have a majority of folks saying they want more of this. Okay, so this is, even though there's a lot of red on the screen, it's important not to be overwhelmed by that color. It's just, you know, it's just you're seeing the trend of a growing number of people who prefer to see a little bit less of the density moving forward from a residential perspective. Here's attached single family. You're still getting almost half of the participants saying they want more of this, okay? Standard multifamily, this is probably, I think this ended up being the lowest rated residential option with 85% saying they want no more of this. Again, I'll come back to some of the interpretation here. And then mid-rise multifamily, we actually had close to 30% of those participating that they would actually like to see more of this, either a lot more or some more of the mid and high-rise multifamily. So non-residential, this is where we tested different character for office, commercial, and sort of the non-residential uses, the isolated development, and the strip development. The first two options we gave to folks were the least popular, with 43%, a little bit more than that, saying they want no more of this isolated development. But again, you still have half the folks saying that, you know, they would like to see a little bit more of this in the city of Gallatin. Strip development, by and large, people are sort of over this auto-centric sort of commercial corridor type of development in the city. Suburban lifestyle center, I think sort of, not to throw out a Hendersonville example, but Indian Lake Village is an example of that sort of lifestyle center concept. Very popular with those who participate in the survey. Probably the most popular was this village or town center. So think sort of the urban Gallatin, not urban, but sort of the center city of Gallatin and the walkable neighborhoods around the center of town, or around the square, is the most popular of the choices for non-residential character that we saw. But mixed use walkable corridors radiating out of downtown was also very popular. And then we lost a little bit of popularity when we started talking about building heights of the non-residential. Although I'd say that a third of the people who participated still would like to see more mid and high-rise development in the city of Gallatin. So a couple of notes about this before I move on to the other series of images that we tested is one, it's important for us as planners to make sure that the plan that we're preparing for your consideration is giving enough options so that anyone living in Gallatin can see something they want to live in and something that they want to work in and something they want to shop in. It's important that we don't do sort of land use by democracy. We all like the idea of democracy, but in thinking about the development patterns, it's important to make sure that everybody has an opportunity. So the goal here is to strike the right balance between the forms that you've seen on the screen, but understanding where there are going to be shortcomings or pitfalls or red flags if we do pursue an option, I think is really important. So moving on to the second part of the survey that we did is we just basically threw up a series, we presented a series of images to the public just in sort of seemingly random order. They were not explained, it was just an image, and we asked on a sliding scale for folks to say that it was or not suitable for the city of Gallatin. And so what I'm sharing with you here is just the results of that, the raw scores that were generated by that sliding scale as selected by all 820 something participants, just the raw scores. So I'm going to go through these probably without much explanation, just to give you a sense of how these things rated as a result of the survey. So this is the top rated photo. It scored 86 out of 100. So it was determined to be very suitable as a landscape for the city of Gallatin. And again, I'm going to do this without commentary, just kind of flip through these. So already you're seeing a really big attraction to green space, but also walkability. And so it's like you've seen images that were both very dense and very low dense and not really much in between. So that's very interesting. We'll just keep going through these. And so far, you know, all these images that I've flipped through so far, even though they are in a sort order, are all images that were found to be suitable for the city of Gallatin. Still suitable. And about here is when we start to make the transition away from suitability, and now we're in the not suitable range. And so this is where, you know, most folks are saying, you know, this is not really what we're looking to achieve with the city's growth. I believe this is the last two. These are the last two photos. And again, this is a representation of that strip development that scored so poorly in the earlier section of the survey. So so that's we really wanted to share with you the raw results, but let you know where we're headed with this. There's even though it seems very simplistic, just be looking at photos and scores, there's a lot we can ascertain from what people like and don't like, but we've got to dig fairly deep to find it. We've got to make sure that we're not getting misled because people are picking photos of higher image quality or where there's an age of development influence or something about the photo itself that's sort of leading to people's opinions. So we're gonna go through this pretty systematically to find the correlations between the image's score and some of the characteristics that you would be able to influence through the comprehensive plan. We're also going to be looking at which pictures had the most consensus, whether it was consensus for suitability or not. And which photos were the most divisive. I don't mean divisive in a negative way, I just mean, you know, where half the people really loved it and half the people really hated it. So it's really important to look at all of that. And we're not going to try to guess at this. So what we plan to do is pull together at least one focus group, maybe two, just depends on how it goes, with people who actually did the survey and get them to get into a discussion about why they weighed in the way they did. So we make sure we're interpreting this the right way. Again, the goal here is just to make sure that the plan is accommodating anyone who might live in Gallatin, and to strike the right balance between what the community as a whole is preferring and what an individual homeowner or resident within Gallatin would like to have as an option. So let's look at those results. A quick update on the plan drafting. We continue to meet with the planning department staff weekly. We are really very much now into sort of writing the plan itself. The appendix is largely finished, except for a couple of placeholders that are waiting on the process to finish playing out. Probably the next thing that you'll be seeing from me is this item number 4 here, is that we want to make sure that the land use policies and the design guidelines and any other recommendations that you're going to be asked to endorse at the end of this process are indeed sort of achieving your goals. And so we've got, if you remember the plan outline as we've talked about it previously, there are 3 strategy sections of this plan that are really defining the vision that you have for the city. One is a strategy for economic development. One is a strategy to ensure quality of life and affordability. And one is a strategy to make sure you're preserving what you like about Gallatin, whether it's historic resources or open space and natural resources. And so we're currently putting together some working groups to make sure that the strategy chapters that we're writing for the plan are really reflective of what we've heard through the community engagement process and what you had in mind. And to that end, these working groups will be consist of representatives from the council, the planning commission, and then relevant boards and commissions and committees that exist within city government, historic preservation and additional development board, for example. So we'll work with the mayor and the staff to make the right connections, but you will be seeing an invitation from us in the near future. I'd like to get at least one of you on each of these strategy groups. Just again, this is not labor intensive. It's just to make sure that the vision that the plan is aspiring to is consistent with what you have in mind, so there are no surprises by the time we get to the end of this process. Again, the strategies are going to dictate the plan policies and guidelines. Those things aren't going to be written until we know exactly what it is you want to accomplish. And if we write them beforehand, then it's probably going to be a plan that you don't believe in or have a lot of confidence in terms of what it will create. So with that, I'd be happy to stick around for questions or comments. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.